The last transport. Leon had moved 347 bodies in 6 years. He stopped counting after that. The gurney's wheels squeaked as he pushed it down the empty corridor. Rain hammered against the windows. Thunder rolled somewhere in the distance, deep and patient. The body beneath the white sheet was fresh, male, elderly, cardiac arrest in room 412, standard transfer to the basement morgue. Leon had done this run so many times he could navigate it blind. But tonight felt different. "You're taking Mr. Halloway?" Nurse Chen had asked when he arrived on the 4th floor. She stood in the doorway of 412, backlit by the pale glow of medical equipment. "That's the job," Leon said. She'd looked at him then. Really looked at him. Her eyes held something he couldn't name. "He was trying to tell us something," she said. Right at the end, kept pointing at the window, at the storm. Leon waited. "He seemed terrified," Chen continued, "like he saw something out there, something coming. Lots of patients get confused near the end." "Maybe." She stepped aside to let him pass. "Just be careful tonight, Leon." He'd pushed the gurney out without responding. Now he was alone with Mr. Halloway in the service elevator. The ancient car descended with a grinding whine. Rain drummed on the metal roof of the shaft. Lightning flashed through the narrow window, strobing the white sheet. The sheet that seemed to be moving. Leon's hand froze on the gurney rail. No. Just his imagination. Bodies didn't move, except when they did, settling, gases releasing, muscles relaxing. He'd seen it before. Natural processes, nothing supernatural. The sheet rose slightly over the chest area. "Stop it," Leon whispered to himself. The elevator lurched. Leon's stomach dropped. The lights flickered once, twice, then held steady. Thunder shook the building, closer now. The sheet fell still. Leon exhaled. 4 more floors. That's all. Just 4 more floors and he'd be done. He could go back upstairs, finish his shift in the warm cafeteria with terrible coffee and old magazines. The elevator's emergency lights clicked on. The main lights died. Red bathed everything. The sheet looked dark now. Burgundy, like it was soaked in something. "Come on," Leon muttered, jabbing the basement button repeatedly. The body sat up. Leon's heart stopped, actually stopped. For one impossible moment, his chest was empty and silent. Mr. Halloway's corpse remained upright under the sheet. The fabric clung to the contours of his face, mouth open, eyes hollow, one arm extended from beneath the sheet, pointing at Leon. "No," Leon breathed. "No, no, no." "Down," the corpse said. The voice wasn't human. It was air pushed through dead tissue, a whisper of deflating lungs, the last gasp of cooling meat. "Get down." Leon pressed himself against the elevator wall. His finger found the emergency stop button and hammered it. Nothing happened. The elevator continued its descent. "Please," Leon said. "Please, I'm just doing my job. I didn't." "Get down." The corpse lunged forward. The sheet fell away. Mr. Halloway's face was gray, his mouth stretched impossibly wide, his dead eyes fixed on Leon with an intensity that burned. Leon dropped to the floor, covering his head with his arms. The elevator's ceiling exploded inward. Metal shrieked, glass shattered, rain poured through a jagged hole above. Something massive moved in the darkness of the shaft, something that breathed in wet, rattling gasps. Leon looked up. Through the torn ceiling, between the strobing lightning flashes, he saw it. A shape that didn't make sense. Too many limbs, too many angles, eyes that reflected the red emergency lights like a wolf's. It reached down through the hole with something that might have been a hand. Mr. Holloway's corpse stood between Leon and the reaching thing. The old man's body spread its arms wide, blocking Leon completely. "Not him," the corpse said in that horrible deflated lung voice. "Not yet." The thing in the shaft screamed. The sound wasn't thunder. It was rage and hunger twisted into something that made Leon's ears bleed. Then the elevator doors opened. Basement level. The morgue. Leon crawled out on his hands and knees, not looking back. Behind him, he heard the wet sound of something retreating. The rain continued to pour through the broken ceiling. When he finally glanced over his shoulder, Mr. Holloway's body lay peacefully on the gurney once more, the sheet pulled neatly up to his chin. The ceiling was intact, not a scratch on it. Leon completed the transfer on autopilot, signed the paperwork, wheeled the empty gurney back to the elevator. He took the stairs instead. Dr. Reyes found him in the stairwell 20 minutes later, sitting on the landing between the first and second floors. "Leon, you okay?" "The body from 412, Leon said slowly. "Mr. Holloway, did anyone else? Did the nurses mention anything unusual about him?" "Unusual how?" Nurse Chen said he was pointing at something, at the storm. "Oh," Reyes nodded. "Yeah, Chen mentioned that. Said Holloway kept saying the same thing over and over. It comes in the rain. Probably delusional. Hypoxia does strange things." Leon's blood turned to ice water. "We've had 6 deaths this week," Reyes continued, checking his tablet. "All during storms, all cardiac events. Strange coincidence." He looked up at Leon. "You sure you're all right? You're pale." Leon managed to nod. He worked the rest of his shift in a daze. 2 more transports, both to the basement. Both times he took the long route through the main corridors, past security stations and nurses' desks, places with people, places with witnesses. At 6 in the morning, his shift ended. Leon walked through the hospital's main entrance into the gray dawn. The storm had passed. The rain had stopped. For now. He looked up at the clearing sky and thought about Mr. Holloway, about the way the old man's corpse had stood between him and that thing in the darkness, about the price of that protection. Leon had moved 347 bodies before he stopped counting. He wondered how many more he'd have to move before the thing in the rain decided it was his turn. Thunder rumbled on the horizon. Another storm was coming. They always did. The Watcher in the Rain. The first drops hit Marcus's tent fly as he hammered the final stake into the soft earth. Perfect timing. He'd made this hike a dozen times before, knew these woods like the creases in his own palms. The clearing sat 3 miles from the nearest trail marker. No cell service, no other campers, exactly how he wanted it. Thunder rolled across the canopy above. Marcus ducked inside and zipped the entrance shut. Rain drummed against the nylon in a steady, increasing rhythm. He arranged his gear with practiced efficiency. Sleeping bag unfurled, headlamp hung from the ceiling loop, boots tucked in the vestibule. The forest sounds filtered through the downpour. Normal sounds, wind through pine branches, water rushing down invisible slopes. He heated water on his camp stove and ate dinner, listening to the storm. By 9 o'clock, full darkness had swallowed the woods. The rain intensified. Marcus lay in his sleeping bag, eyes closed, letting the white noise pull him toward sleep. This was why he came out here, to disconnect, to remember what silence felt like beneath the noise. Then he heard it. A sound that didn't fit. Not quite footsteps, more like something heavy, dragging through the underbrush. Marcus opened his eyes. The sound stopped. Rain continued its relentless percussion against the tent. He waited. Nothing. Probably a deer, he thought, or a raccoon investigating his food bag, which hung properly, 12 feet up a tree, 40 feet from his tent. He'd done this before. Animals got curious. The woods were full of them. Marcus closed his eyes again. The sound came back, closer this time. It moved wrong, too deliberate, too slow. Animals moved with purpose or caution, but this thing moved like it was learning how, like it was remembering. Marcus sat up and grabbed his flashlight. He unzipped the tent fly an inch and shone the beam into the clearing. Rain sliced through the light in silver streaks. Trees stood where they'd always stood. His fire pit sat cold and dark, nothing else. He killed the light and sealed the tent. The rain answered with harder drops and thunder shook the ground. Marcus lay back down. His heart knocked against his ribs, annoying, irrational. He'd camped alone in grizzly country. He'd weathered storms that collapsed tents. He didn't spook easy. But something felt wrong. The sound had stopped completely. Even the normal forest noises had gone quiet beneath the rain. No insects, no night birds, just water and wind and his own breathing. Then he heard it breathing too. Right outside the tent, not panting like a dog or snorting like a bear, just slow, measured inhalations, long pauses between each breath, like whatever stood there didn't need air quite as often as it should. Marcus's hand found the flashlight. "Hey!" he shouted. "Get out of here!" The breathing stopped. Footsteps retreated, that same dragging, wrong-sounding gait, moving back toward the tree line. Marcus counted to 20, then unzipped the tent and thrust his light into the darkness. Nothing. But the mud told a different story. Impressions led from his tent toward the pines. Not paw prints, not boot treads, something else. Elongated marks, too narrow on one end, too wide on the other, filling with rainwater even as he watched. Marcus stepped out into the storm. The cold rain soaked through his thermal shirt immediately. He swept the flashlight across the clearing perimeter. Trees, shadows, rain. The beam caught something at the edge, just for a second, and Marcus's breath stopped. A shape, tall, wrong proportions, standing between two pines. It didn't move like a bear standing upright. Didn't move like a person either. It just stood there. And even though Marcus couldn't make out details, he felt it watching him. He aimed the light directly at it. Nothing there, just trees and rain and darkness pressing in from all sides. Marcus backed toward his tent, light sweeping in arcs. His heel caught on a root and he stumbled. The flashlight beam jerked skyward, and for one horrible moment, everything went dark. When he got the light steady again, the shape stood closer. Just at the edge of his clearing now, maybe 20 feet away. He still couldn't see it clearly. The rain distorted everything, but it was there. He knew it was there. Marcus made his decision. He ducked into the tent and grabbed his pack. Forget the stakes, forget the food bag, forget everything except getting out. His fingers fumbled with the sleeping bag, stuffing it halfway into the pack. His phone, useless for calls, but it had GPS, went in his pocket. The breathing started again. Closer, right against the tent wall this time. The nylon bent inward where something pressed against it. Not a hand, not a paw, something else. The fabric stretched and stretched, and Marcus stopped moving, stopped breathing, stopped thinking anything except run. He exploded out of the tent's other side. His feet hit mud and he ran. The flashlight beam bounced crazily ahead of him. He didn't know which direction the trail was anymore. Didn't care. Just away. Away from the clearing. Away from whatever stood in the rain. Branches whipped his face. Roots tried to trip him. Thunder covered the sound of his gasping breaths. Behind him, that dragging sound, keeping pace, never faster, never slower, just there. Marcus ran until his lungs burned, until his legs went numb, until the rain felt like ice picks against his skin. The forest opened up suddenly and he nearly tumbled down an embankment. The trail. He'd found the trail. Marcus scrambled down to the packed dirt and ran harder. How long he ran, he couldn't say. Hours, maybe, or minutes. Time moved wrong out here. Eventually, the trees thinned. The trailhead parking lot materialized through the rain. His truck sat where he'd left it, alone under the weak yellow light of a single lamppost. Marcus fumbled his keys, dropped them, scooped them from a puddle, got the door open, threw himself inside. He locked the doors and sat there, engine running, heater blasting, waiting for his heart to slow. The rain continued. Nothing emerged from the forest. Marcus drove. He didn't look in the rearview mirror until he hit the main highway 15 miles later. The road stretched empty behind him. But when he finally got home, exhausted and shaking, he found something in his pack that shouldn't have been there. A clump of wet pine needles, arranged in a perfect circle. And he'd never stopped to pick up anything. The Gray Door. I've been a building surveyor for 26 years. I've walked through derelict factories, condemned tower blocks, listed buildings held together by habit and dry rot. You develop a feel for spaces, for what's structurally sound, for what wants to come down. Harlow Grange Asylum closed in 1991. The council acquired it in 2019 and sat on it for 6 years before finally greenlighting demolition. My job was straightforward. Assess structural integrity, flag anything of heritage interest, sign off the report. A 2-day job at most. I'd done dozens like it. I arrived on a Tuesday morning in October. Dry day, low sky. The building was enormous, 4 stories of Victorian brick stretching back from the road, the original administrative wing flanked by 2 long residential wards, windows boarded, grounds overgrown, the kind of place people take photographs of to post online. I signed in with the site security, one man in a temporary cabin who barely looked up, and went in through the main entrance. The ground floor was standard dereliction. Peeling paint, collapsed ceiling tiles, the smell of damp and something chemical underneath. I worked methodically, room by room, checking floor joists, noting cracks in the load-bearing walls, photographing anything that needed flagging. The east wing matched the plans exactly. The west wing matched. The administrative block matched. It was when I got to the north corridor that things stopped matching. According to the blueprint, the north corridor terminated at a fire door leading to an external yard, 42 meters from the main junction. I paced it myself, 42 meters, and reached the fire door. Pushed it open. External yard. Exactly as drawn. Except I'd been counting doors as I walked. The blueprint showed 8 on the left side of the corridor, 7 on the right. I'd passed 9 on the left. I stood there in the cold air from the open fire door and counted back in my head. 9. I was certain. I walked it again. This time I marked each door with a chalk cross, 1 through 9 on the left. The 9th door sat between the 8th and the fire exit, fitted into a section of wall the plan showed as blank. The door itself was different from the others. Where every other door in the building was institutional green, scratched and peeling, this one was a darker gray. and the paint was not peeling. I stood in front of it for a long moment. I told myself there were any number of explanations. Plans get updated, rooms get added, a later conversion, a partition wall, a utility space. Surveyors work from the most recent plans available, and sometimes the most recent plans are 20 years out of date. I'd seen it before. I tried the handle. It opened. The room beyond was small, 6 feet by 8 perhaps, a single metal-framed bed, a chair, a bedside table with nothing on it. The walls had been painted recently. I could still detect the faint smell under the damp. A single window, boarded on the outside, let in a thin line of pale light. And on the door, on the inside, was a nameplate. The kind they used in institutions, a small metal frame designed to hold a card. The card inside was white. The printing on it was clear. Hail, M. My name. I'm not a superstitious man. I stood in that doorway and went through every rational explanation I could construct. A common surname, a previous patient, a coincidence so unlikely it felt designed. I photographed the nameplate. I photographed the room. I wrote everything down in my sight notes, hands steady, breathing measured, because that is what you do. I walked back down the north corridor and out through the main entrance and sat in my car for 11 minutes. I know it was 11 minutes because I watched the clock. I have sat in a lot of cars over the years, waiting outside jobs, eating sandwiches, writing up notes. I am comfortable with silence. I'm comfortable with my own company. Those 11 minutes were the longest I have spent inside a vehicle. I kept returning to the nameplate in my mind. Hail, M. I turned it over the way you turn over a problem, methodically, from every angle, looking for the solution that makes the most sense. My surname appears in the 1881 census approximately 12,000 times. There's nothing remarkable about the name Hale. There's nothing remarkable about the initial M. Matthew, Martin, Michael, Margaret. 100 names beginning with M. I told myself this. I told myself this carefully and at length. Then I drove back inside. I finished the survey. West corridor, upper floors, roof inspection. I was professional. I was thorough. I did not go back to the north corridor. I completed the job I had been contracted to do, and I drove home. That evening I sat at my kitchen table and opened my laptop. Harlow Grange had been a private asylum, one of the smaller county institutions that proliferated in the Victorian period and declined through the 20th century as attitudes toward mental health changed and funding dried up. It closed in 1991 when the last 11 residents were transferred to community care facilities in the surrounding area. At its peak in the 1930s, it had housed just under 200 patients. The County Heritage Archive had digitized the admissions records in 2022. Complete ledgers going back to 1887. I searched the name Hale. Nothing. I searched variations. Hale, Haley, Hales. I searched the initial M against every surname in the records. I spent 2 hours working through the ledgers systematically, the way I work through a building, room by room, no shortcuts. There was no patient at Harlow Grange whose name matched the nameplate. I closed the laptop. I went to bed. I lay in the dark and listened to the house settle around me and thought about painted walls and metal nameplates and the particular quality of silence in a room that has been sealed for a long time. I slept badly. In the morning, I drove back to the site. The security guard wasn't in his cabin. I went inside, down the main corridor, turn left, north corridor. I counted the doors as I walked. My chalk crosses were still there, 1 through 8 on the left and then the 9th. The gray door, I stood in front of it. The nameplate was there. Hale, M, and below the name, something I hadn't noticed the day before, or something that hadn't been there. A date, printed in the same clean type as the name. Tomorrow's date? I didn't open the door. I walked back down the north corridor, back through the main entrance. I got in my car and I drove home, and I called my manager and told him I was sending the report over and that someone else would need to complete the site sign-off because I had a family matter to deal with. He was fine about it. I've not been back to Harlow Grange. I drove back to the site office and asked the security guard, when I eventually found him, how long he'd been stationed there. 3 weeks, he said. Had anyone else been in the building? Not on his watch, he said. Before that, he couldn't say. I asked him if the name Hale meant anything to him in relation to the site. He looked at me properly for the first time. No, he said. Should it? I filed my structural report that evening. Complete. Professional. Accurate. I noted the unlisted room in the north corridor, recorded its dimensions, photographed its contents, flagged the discrepancy with the existing plans. I made no mention of the nameplate. The demolition is scheduled for spring. I've checked the council planning portal twice a week since October. Sometimes I tell myself I should go back before they pull it down, see the north corridor one last time, confirm that there's a rational explanation for all of it. I haven't gone. I keep thinking about that date, about whether it was a warning or an appointment.